Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to third day of Emergence, the ABS Summit 2021. And the first session of this day, or first one of the concurrent sessions, is by Sahana Chattopadhyay, speaking on leading in uncertain times. I was just remarking on the fact that Shahana's website is called Emergence, and so is our summit. So there is some special link somewhere between Shahana's work and the session today and our conference. So I'm looking forward to discovering the links. She is someone with a lot of experience. Let me read a little bit out from her profile. She is Shahana is a certified organization development professional, learning architect, coach, facilitator, and instructional designer with 20 plus years of experience across many different settings. She works at the intersection of IT, organizational learning, complexity, and emergence. During her corporate career, she has held various roles like L&D architect and consultant, workplace reimagination consultant, enterprise community manager, coach, and facilitator. I know she has also participated and completed the ODCP program of our ISAB. She left the corporate world in 2016 to pursue her work in emergence, complexity, system sensing, and designing of generative spaces more deeply. Shahana partners with individuals, teams, and organizations through workshops, coaching, consulting, and training to enable them to embark on the journey of learning and leading in uncertain times, such as these, I dare say. She synergizes her experience to help build skills and capacities for regenerative leadership, design spaces for emergent learning, and communities for generative conversation. She also keynotes and facilitates sessions at global conferences and runs webinars on topics of relevance today. So, Shahana, looking forward keenly to hearing your observations, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me, and a very, very loud shout out to Sushma for really encouraging me, even pushing me, because I'm also lazy. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'd just like to share my screen. So I'm going to go into screen sharing mode. And let me know if you'll see it okay, please. Yeah, is that visible and clear? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on leading in uncertain times. Thank you all for being here. And why did I choose this topic? As chaos and ambiguity is literally spinning out of control and uncertainty is looming large, everything seems to be falling apart. However, the more I delved into this space of emergence and uncertainty, I also realized that uncertainty can be a very fertile place of hope and possibilities. It offers us no guarantees, but space for reimagination. And that's what intrigued me, and to delve deeper into this nexus of uncertainty, ambiguity, and what we call sense making and emergence. And that's what has kind of brought me to this point. A time when the stability and familiarity of the old is disintegrating, and it is creating space for new narratives, new structures, and new ways of being to emerge, is the point where leadership also has an opportunity to, I would say, reinvent itself, which I feel is increasingly becoming important. To give form to the future that is emerging, that is actually existing in the present moment, we need leaders who are wayfinders and visionaries who can act as compasses in this essentially unknown and unmapped territory. Leaders who can step into uncertainty without grasping for solutions, who can stay with the question without feeling insecure and without giving into that stress of without giving into that stress of not knowing, but embracing that not knowing as a part of being. So those are some of the qualities that I wish to explore through some concepts and examples of such leaders. To be very honest, when Sanjeev and I were discussing, I found it very hard to come up with examples of the kind of leaders that I would call facilitative or wayfinders. But after some deep diving, I realized maybe not everyone is embodying everything, but there are people there who are doing their work differently. And I just want to highlight a couple of examples later. So we are in a phase shift and in a liminal space. Joanna Macy calls this point the great turning. The great turning is a shift from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining civilization. And to bring about this life-sustaining and life-affirming civilization, we need leaders who can tap into the latent potentials, who can hold space for what is wanting to emerge from the field, and who can let go, most importantly, let go of what needs to die. So we need leaders to be hospicing and also midwifing. So such leaders are stewards and facilitators of a regenerative future. I love this quote by Thomas Friedman, primarily because it kind of sums up everything that the crisis that we are experiencing today with the collapse. The world as we knew it is collapsing. The old stories of growth, development, technology as panacea for all ills, and humans in control of vast resources of this planet and other humans is no longer quite cutting the ice. They are no longer making sense, even as we experience the collapse around us. Through hubris and our many denials, we have managed to bring this planet to the brink of disaster. Ecological crises have never been more apparent, more visible. Floods, fires, fumes are wiping out species, killing humans and devastating regions. Then came the pandemic, challenging the leaders, decision makers, and policy designers like never before. Organizations were forced to rapidly devise new modes of working, organizing, and leading. Most organizations that I've spoken to, leaders I've spoken to, have been struggling with it, struggling to lead from a distance, struggling to lead people they can't see, struggling to trust, struggling to believe, struggling to emerge. Reimagining a regenerative future from this chaos, I realized requires visionary, facilitative, and compassionate leaders, compassionate not only with others, but compassionate with themselves too. And why does that become almost impossible? I'll come to that later. Some lessons that I want to quickly highlight from the pandemic that is forcing us to rethink, reimagine, and reinvent ourselves. The pandemic was a point of discontinuity in the fabric of our normal existence. Every country, developed or developing, were caught unprepared. The pandemic revealed the brokenness beneath, the inequity lying just beneath the gloss and glitter of our consumer societies. The global economy, seemingly unstoppable, juddered to a halt. The globalized world started erecting boundaries once again. And in all of this, sadly, the failure of leadership across the board stood out in stark relief. Our current civilization is based on a few denials that I would like to highlight. And these are the denials that have led us to this brink of collapse that we are currently experiencing, again, across the board, across systems, simultaneous systems failures. The denial of our limits, denial of nature, denial of different worldviews, and most importantly, the denials of our humanity and our deep interconnectedness, ineradicable interconnectedness. Even as the global economy juddered to a halt and population retreated from public space, hunkering in place to escape an invisible virus. A great pause descended on the world. In this pause, many things became evident. The most critical being the influence of our collective choices for centuries and decades in creating a world that Otto Scharmer says no one really wants. We never realized how our individual choices could impact our collective future in this fashion, and we are where we are now, at the brink of probably the sixth mass extinction. What we need more than anything is mindful, awareness-based, conscious leadership. And embracing and befriending uncertainty is the only way for leaders to move forward. Past solutions and mindsets will not only not work, but they are probably likely to be obstacles in envisioning, reimagining, reinventing a different future, a future different from the past, a future that works for all. And most importantly, the world needs leaders who can operate from a place of inner coherence and a place of inner trust in the universe. Ultimately, that leads to emergence. Therefore, along with leaders, there is a dire need for institutions and organizations. As we move into the future, there is a dire need for institutions and organizations to move from an extractive and exploitative paradigm of profit, power, and privilege for the few to more meaningful and healing ways of being and operating on this planet. Frederick Laloux called this having an evolutionary purpose. I call this creating organizations with souls, because souls are conscious and have conscience. Souls cannot really be harmful. There is an imperative need to make a transformative shift now towards life-affirming and healing organizations that nurture and build up human potential. And that's what I'm going to explore. I love this quote from Margaret Wheatley, where she says, "My question is how organizations can lead us not towards some predictable goal, but toward a greater and greater capacity to handle unpredictability, and with it, a greater capacity to love and care about other people." I think that's the core of leadership today. That's the core of what organizations must become if this planet needs to survive, if we have to survive. Even if human beings as a species not only have to survive, but what is the reason for our survival? So that we can kill more species? Or can we become stewards of this planet? So this quote by Margaret Wheatley summarizes precisely what is expected of leaders in these times of intense ambiguity and volatility. The industrial era paradigms are obsolete and irrelevant for our days. And yet the leadership styles and constructs persist in churning out leaders totally unsuitable for our current times. Here is an example, a little bit of a segue. Here is an example of Rosa Parks. What made her stand out for me was that she chose an action for which she did not know what the outcome would be. She literally stepped into uncertainty, embodying her vision of the future that she wanted to inhabit. And just by taking that one action, she changed the course of history and law. Let's look at another example from more recent times. Before we unpack what are the qualities of leadership that allows us to befriend and step into uncertainty, here is Jacinda Ardern, the PM of New Zealand, demonstrating some of these abilities to hold space. She operated from authenticity, vulnerability, and complete not knowing. Her body language, her gestures, arise from a place of wholeness and authenticity. She did not know how she would be accepted. She did not know if it was right or not. She did not think, but she operated from a space of integrated heart, mind, and soul. And that's the integration that is required more and more today. We have moved up, leaders have, all of us actually, because of our educational, cultural background, we have moved up only into the cognitive space, where our mind supersedes every other form of sensing, feeling, intuiting, and knowing. And that's probably where emergence is blocked. You cannot sense into emergence through the mind. And so, highlighting some of the qualities here, what makes her stand out, what made her stand out, at least for me, is relatability, meaning making, presencing, daring to share and communicate with clarity, and an unwavering interest in enacting change. Beginning from the bottom up, the example where she meant what she said, she immediately changed New Zealand gun laws after the Christchurch attack. She did not obfuscate. She did not obfuscate, but shared with complete clarity what she was intending. And she was fully and wholly present with her whole being when she was in those situations that she had never encountered before, that she had not planned for. She was vulnerable and present. And that's what made her different in those situations. So, yeah, there is no new normal. That's what I believe. We can't go back to the past. Though businesses I know are struggling with business as usual, and they are talking of a second normal, new normal, I think we need a complete great reset. What we had normalized in the past was not really normal. We had normalized those through cultural stories. So there cannot be a normal when we are harping back on the past. Our learned behaviors keep us from. So before that, quickly, sorry. I just want to draw attention to this poem by Yeats, which I love. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Is it a coincidence that this was written exactly 100 years ago? After the aftermath of First World War and the Spanish flu, when the half of world's population was wiped out. I don't know, to me it felt like serendipity or maybe synchronicity. We fear the unknown as human beings. It raises our self-defense tactics, but fight, flight, and freeze will no longer work. It is going to be courage, curiosity, and compassion for the future. That will take us to the next phase, the Great Reset. So yes, moving on to what stops leaders from who they can be. What stops them from being their fullest, from being the expression of their fullest selves? What are the obstacles? So here are some, and I'm sure there are many, but here are some that stood out for me. We are psychologically addicted to certainty and predictability, and we are not used to slowing down. The unexpected, urgent times require us to slow down. We find it extremely difficult. We want answers rather than staying with questions. Not having an answer, not knowing the solution, having an open-ended question without knowing what that solution might be makes us extremely uncomfortable, and leaders even more so. We want to appear in control, even when there is nothing to control. Even in the face of collapse, we want to be controlling. We are used to making decisions from past patterns. We are not used to learning from the future. And the complexity and ambiguity overwhelms us, so we tend to shut that out. We tend to shut down and close down. And all notions of leadership gets in the way. So when we look at all of this collectively, we can realize that these are kind of our learned behaviors creating a sense of helplessness in the face of unpredictability. And that very helplessness keeps us rooted to our comfort zones. It prevents us from moving forward. It prevents us from getting unstuck. And what happens is we tend to muddle through rather than seek a breakthrough. And the more we cling, the more difficult it becomes to envision the new. The more we cling, the more fearful we get, and the more we tend to close in. And that's the last place we want leaders to be operating from in these extremely ambiguous times. But of course, being a leader under these conditions is a double burden, because leaders from the old paradigms are expected to be confident and in control. They're expected to compete and win. They're expected to know the answers and focus on influence, prioritize speed and productivity. What happens to the shareholders' values if they don't? They're supposed to direct and be hyper-focused on the rational. And all of these paradigms actually become obstacles for leaders to shed the old patterns and embrace the new. These become a kind of a blockage in their journey towards emergence. So I want to pause for a minute and just reflect on these questions for a minute. What are some of my individual patterns, beliefs, and behaviors that each one of us need to let go of to befriend uncertainty? What can we do in our organizations to pave the way for a different future? That's not only about sustainability, but that's about thriving and flourishing, a thrivable future. So let's explore a different way of being, a different way of operating in this world. What skills and capabilities do leaders need to hold space for the unknown, the ambiguous, to stay with uncertainty and chaos, to be wayfinders and facilitators? So here are some I've captured. There are many more, I'm sure. Befriending uncertainty. I'm not only saying staying with uncertainty, I'm saying befriending uncertainty, embracing it, becoming its friend, becoming its ally, balancing paradoxical perspectives, and I'll expand on this in a bit. Embracing systems thinking and seeing and sensing. Often we only talk about systems thinking, but systems sensing is a whole different approach where we really need to sense not only with our cognitive brain, but with our whole being. Holding space for generative conversations and facilitating meaning making. This is something Jacinda Ardern did particularly well when out of all of that chaos, she was able to construct meaning for the people so that they felt held and understood and seen and heard. Recognizing the power of intention, and this I believe is very powerful, and of course, trusting in emergence. Just as the industrial era required certain kinds of leadership, this age of emergence requires another kind of leadership. This paradigm shift is an inside-out approach. It is not about acquiring tools and methods and processes. Yes, some of those do exist, but this is also an inside-out approach that begins with each one of us working on ourselves from within. So long back, and this is a quote I love, the CEO of Hanover Insurance, Bill O'Brien, had said, "The success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener or of the leader." And this has never been more true. The crisis we are in now is a crisis of consciousness and conscience. What counts is not only what leaders do and how they do it, but the inner place from which they operate, or the source from which all their actions arise. The source of their inner wisdom, their intention, drives the outcome on the outside. So I'll focus on a few core skills from these, and I'll try to break them down. I started with balancing paradoxical perspectives, because what I've noticed is each one of us, and leaders more so, we tend to fall into the trap of dualistic thinking, either or thinking. And very often, in leaders, in their hurry to make decisions and to make effective decisions, to be productive, if you will, slip into this dualism, missing out on the richness of diversity, missing out on the richness of what is around them. So they fail to sense the system. They fail to sense the entirety of the system, and thus create unintentional side effects from their decisions, which they can't see and are not even aware of. And sensing of the system is not a linear logic thing. Like I said, it's a whole embodied experience. So an ability to hold multiple truths, to create space for multiple realities to exist at the same time without being contradictory. And often if contradictory, that's fine. To be able to hold that within is one of the core, I would say, of leading from emergence and leading in uncertain times. There are going to be many, many, many paradoxical situations facing us today. We cannot always say, very often we can't, as to what is right, what is wrong. And maybe nothing is right and nothing is wrong. They all just exist. How do we create space for that coexistence of these multiple truths? So avoiding the dangers of a single story, avoiding that single narrative as an explanation for everything, celebrating different and contrasting viewpoints, even actively seeking inconsistencies, actively looking for those inconsistencies, and not only what confirms my beliefs and biases. Wearing multiple lenses and letting go of past patterns, listening for underlying themes, connecting the bigger picture, seeing the pattern, sensing what is not being said, hearing the unheard, unsaid, and moving from an ego-centered approach to an ecocentric, systemic outlook, systemic approach. So these are, I would say, some of the foundational qualities / skills / inner capacities that leaders today need to assimilate, acquire, take a journey upon. Holding space for generative conversations. This is a diagram from Otto Scharmer, MIT Presencing Institute. And he explains this beautifully, that very often, 90% of the time, we are listening in a downloading mode, where we are listening from our past patterns. We are just listening to what confirms what I already know and completely ignoring what doesn't suit my biases, what doesn't fit my worldview. So if everything that I don't like or haven't heard before actually goes unheard, literally. The next level is the factual listening. So noticing information that I did not know before, which is good, but not enough. The third level is listening with an open heart, empathic listening, learning to put myself in the shoes of the other, seeing through the eyes of another, opening heart. Again, still not enough. I love what he says about generative listening. Creating spaces for generative listening means creating space to literally listen the new into being. When each one of us are in the space of generative listening, it's a space where we don't come with biases, judgments, past patterns. We let go of what was there within us, even if it is for a short while, and literally listen from the field of the future, holding space for something new to be born. When leaders can become facilitators and creators of such containers and can listen from this space of generativity, completely, I would say, transformation can happen. And I've experienced it, I've seen it, I've been a part of such conversations. It's a deep and abiding transformation that doesn't happen because XYZ had some expertise and they shared it. It happens because everyone became a part of that experience of listening, hearing, and something that was not said or thought of by anyone before got said and spoken in that container of space, in that space of generative listening. Parker Palmer calls such spaces circles of trust. Can leaders create such circles of trust? Can leaders hold space for something new to be born? Even as we literally teeter on this verge of collapse, as we reach the end of one, I would say, maybe one civilizational narrative, can we hold space for the new narratives to be born? So yes, we are at a fork in the road. Do we want to return to the normal as we know it? Or do we dare to dream of a different destiny, of different kind of leadership? In a time of crisis like we are in now, with people feeling frightened and uncertain, anxious, overwhelmed, overburdened, leadership doesn't just matter. It matters exponentially more. It is absolutely crucial to build a new future, to build possible futures, literally a world that works for all. And while our past has given us a lot of things, technology, medicine, science, travel, everything, but probably we've never been asked to stay in an emergent space collectively, where the collective consciousness plays a crucial role. Yes, we have role models. We've got Martin Luther, we've got Mother Teresa, we've got Rosa Parks, we've got many more individuals who paved the way, who showed the way, who literally changed. We've got Dr. Ambedkar from India, who changed the fate of thousands, millions. But what we are being called now is a shift in collective consciousness, not only individual consciousness. So how leaders hold space for that within their organizations, within their institutions, within their communities, big, small, medium, large, doesn't matter. That's going to be of crucial importance. Finally, I would say trust in emergence. Leaders need to slow down, step back, seek the new, and stay in the unknown, and see with different eyes. Thank you. I had a little bit of an appendix with a few questions for reflections. And I would also love to hear any questions that anyone has, any point anyone wants to discuss, add, anything. If y'all want me to go back to a slide, talk about something more, I'm happy to do that. I'll stop share.
Sahana, would you like responses to those questions at this time? The questions we put
Basically
up?
anything. So anyone, if anyone
I
wants
think
to
we
ask
need to
me
get everyone
questions,
unmuted. Vidyut, would you please unmute everyone? In that case, there would be
anyone wants to ask me any questions, any comments, anything, I would
Just
love to.
see if you can unmute
Hi,
yourself.
Sanjeev.
Hi.
Hi, they are able to unmute themselves if they want.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
Okay.
the settings are enabled.
You can unmute yourself if you like.
I came in from another breakout room, and I I think there's a little bit of regret that I should have been in here much earlier. I love the last three slides that and what you were talking about. It is something that really resonates with me, and thank you so much. I just wish I'd heard more of you. And the last slide that you had these questions, and I am actually the first question. The first question itself hits me because right now, due to this pandemic and due to what is going on, there is one part of me that wants me to, you know, when this pandemic started and everyone got into this bandwagon of, oh, you got to do this online stuff, you got to do this, and there was this such a rush, and I don't want to do that, and I refused to get involved in it. I was just taking a back seat, and I was looking at it and how that rush came and then it just died off. You know, it was like and I just feel what is happening in this world and what is happening around us is something much bigger than a lot of us even know is about to emerge. And I sense that. I really can't put my finger on it. So I am like, you know, doing my own meditation, being connected, being feeling, and I just sense that something big, something different is emerging in the moment. What is it? I know not. But I am comfortable in this position, you know, not rushing myself into doing new things, you know, starting new things and whatever. Yeah, you know, I got back into doing some things which I used to love to do, like cooking and stuff, because I had so much time in my hands. But on a larger scale, I'm not rushing. I am just taking my time. And what I hear from you is something that really resonates with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Richard. What you said is so beautiful because as the pandemic kicked off, literally, and everyone was, you know, had to hunker in place, there was this tremendous rush to, I don't know, it was almost like a kind of a different kind of acquisition. I'm not saying material acquisition, but a different kind of acquisition,
right,
which completely blocks people from really sensing into this great pause, really staying with the discomfort of not knowing what is going to happen, of not knowing what the future holds, of not even knowing who I will become tomorrow. If there's a job loss and I've lost my designation and my job, who am I then now? Who will I be tomorrow? So that discomfort and just being able to be with that discomfort, maybe even befriending it, maybe even enjoying it. So I loved what you said.
Yeah, in the beginning, in the first 2 months of the pandemic, when the lockdown, I'm not into social media so much, but I did a small post. I said, if you can't go out, go in.
Exactly.
And I
love that.
realized many people didn't actually get it, but that's what I was actually saying, because it's a perfect time to go within, because that's where we find our true answers, and to truly be connected. And so this is it. I actually enjoyed it. I'm thankful this pandemic came, because the world needed it. We were all moving so fast like a headless chicken, and it actually slowed everybody down. And I thought it was a good thing.
Oh yes, the world needed it, and also needed the collapse for us to see everything that the gloss and the glitter is hiding.
Exactly. It was like the house was already shaky and everybody just doing an extension here and there and here and there, but it is not safe anymore. It's not safe to be in it. Yeah, exactly. So that's what is probably going to happen, and it's probably already happening. It's taking shape, and we will probably be able to see the light anytime as it comes. And I am looking forward to that new world. Connectivity and being able to sense and be connected with the environment. We so lost touch with it for a lot of us, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I totally. And leaders even more so. I mean, in their whole rush to be productive and efficient, and God knows what else they need to do.
And we go back so many layers of, of systemic design, where we have become so dependent on others and on the outside world that we've forgotten how to go in and to look for answers within. And it's not anybody's fault, because the education system and, there's so many things, and has created that conditioning. And to break away from that and to say, look, this is who I am, this is what, that itself is monumental for a lot of people.
Sahana, would you like to throw it open now to observations and questions, or would you?
Yes, it's absolutely open. I'm just
okay. I am reminded of one or two phrases that I picked up over the years. One is, future events cast their shadows before them. And the second is that the eye of the storm is where it's quietest. And there's something about this period that we've been going through that reminds me of these two sayings, and that's been enhanced by all that you've been telling us last 40 minutes. When I started out my work career in say 35 years ago, there was an American management writer called Tom Peters. I'm sure many of us would have heard of him.
Yes.
And he also used to write a lot about uncertainty and how uncertainty was changing the markets and so forth. But there was a difference between the uncertainty of those days and the uncertainty of now, in that the concern there was profit, was how profit was being taken away from the big players, the monopolists, the people with large bureaucracies and inflexible decision-making patterns. And nimble players were coming into the market, and they were the ones who were succeeding. So that was how uncertainty was being addressed, at least in the economic kind of corporate, economic, free, private sector environment. But the anxiety today is not about profit at all. It's about survival. It's like we are really under threat. And the kind of responsiveness that we need from organizations is what we've, let's say, seen in Serum Institute or Ranbaxy or these kinds of companies which are making vaccines, or hospitals that are able to increase the number of vaccinations. So everything is now getting geared around survival, and what portends even more is that things are likely to get worse before they get much better. So all organizations, and therefore the silence that we're talking about, the calm, the inner thinking, is actually a kind of the middle of the storm, where, because organizations ultimately have to do some tasks also, quite aside from reflection. So the performance of these tasks will also necessitate new orientations. What do you think of that, Sahana?
I think you're spot on, Sanjeev. What has happened is, for the longest time, and I think Richard mentioned it in a different way, for the longest time, we've been focusing on the outside world. When I say outside world, I mean on the tangible, on the resources, on the consumerism, so everything that took us away from the joys of actually being a human being, a living being on this planet. We found joy in a bigger house, a bigger car, shinier malls, glitzy, glittery, God knows what. And when the pandemic hit, I think the collapse of all of that showed us the hollowness of those things, and the criticality of what is required has been entirely missing from our attention. So when we really needed doctors and nurses and care and infrastructure and health, they were broken. They had never been taken care of. those systems had not been nurtured. And because those systems had not been nurtured, now we have come to this place of survival as opposed to either sustainable, not even and forget thriving. So now we are almost back to ground zero. And maybe the very top 1% are still thriving in their way, but that is not planetary thriving. And like I said, floods, fires, fumes are killing the entire planet. So what you're saying is, it's exactly that. It's like the syndrome of hollow men, you know, hollow with trappings on the outside, but hollow inside. And yeah.
I recently watched a very, very interesting documentary called The Four Horsemen.
Okay.
And
I've heard about it. I've not seen it.
Yeah, it's really mind blowing. And what they say is this: civilization ends every 250 years. They actually go through a transformation, and we are at the last final stage, the stage of decadence, the decadence of overconsumption, you know, decadence of, you know, distraction from the real issue. And all those things are happening right now. And then I stopped and looked around me and I said, oh my goodness, that is exactly what we are going through, the process of the decadence of, you know, and you say the 1%. Yeah, they are doing okay, but in what?
In what?
In what? You know, in more.
And
more of everything.
They want to escape a burning planet, but what will they do? Rotate in space?
Exactly, yeah. If you haven't watched it, it's highly recommended. It's so beautiful.
And decadence leads to decay, right? So ultimately, after decadence comes decay.
Sahana, hi.
Hi.
Jasmeet here.
Hi, Jasmeet.
Go ahead, Jasmeet. Hello.
Yeah. I liked the different aspects of the paradigm you were presenting. I liked the way you phrased it. I liked the different elements. Now, for me, it resonated a lot with existential therapy because I do existential therapy. And the fundamental 4 givens, one of them is that life is essentially unpredictable and unfamiliar. We create meaning in it. So when you were talking about, first you began with befriending the uncertainty, and my mind said she's jumping the gun. We cannot befriend till we first become comfortable. We can only become a friend when we first become comfortable. And then your last slide said that. It said staying with the uncertainty. But in my experience of these last 1.5 years of working with small groups, couples, and individuals, is that there is no common kind of collective response. Different people, different groups are responding differently. But the biggest thing, I think, the block to uncertainty is fear. So, you know, it's your slides kind of, for me, had a missing piece, and that's the piece of fear. Right. That unless, you know, I would love to see how you fit that in, that before leaders or anyone else moves towards letting things emerge, they have to first confront their fears and their internal conflicts and traumas. And what's happened is that this moment of stillness has, the first thing that emerges is what we've suppressed. So what people have been faced with is their fears, their anger, their suppressed traumas. Now, till they go beyond that, they can't really befriend uncertainty. So I would love to, in your paradigm, understand how you see fear, because I found that missing so far.
Okay. No, thanks, Jasmeet. I think that's a brilliant point, because when I probably didn't call out fear the way you're saying it. What I meant more was, or rather in this context, I used the word obstacles to leadership, becoming who they can be, their true fullest expression of their selves. So those obstacles are actually their fears. Those obstacles are what keep them not only stuck, but those obstacles are what raises their deepest insecurities. And also to confront, yes, I don't have a trauma understanding background, but I know exactly what it's saying, that unless we confront our deepest traumas, we cannot move beyond to healing of the trauma. And only when healing of the trauma happens, then can we step into a space where we can stay with uncertainty and then start actively befriending uncertainty. It's a journey, it's a process. I totally agree with you. And just to take a step back, and this is something I've been toying with, this idea, so I'm just throwing it out in the open here. It's not fully formed, but I also believe our civilizational narrative of the past, centuries or decades, the narrative of control, of power, of resource grabbing, of exploitation, of expropriation, extractiveness, even the way our organizations operate, employee, hierarchy, command, control, direct, actually creates this entire environment of trauma, creates trauma within each one of us. Each one of us experience it, express it differently. But I do believe everyone in this civilization, to a lesser or greater degree. Of course, there are more violent traumas like physical trauma, being beaten up as a child, whatever. But overarchingly, the existential narrative of our current civilization creates the whole experience of trauma in each one of us. Everyone. And only when we literally take apart the threads of that narrative and we see what is the, the crux of that narrative, which I said, denial of our limits, of our connection to nature, of our humanity. We are not supposed to be human. We are supposed to be either productive robots or resources, or I don't know what. I don't even know what the success matrix makes people feel like. Do they really feel successful after acquiring, like, I don't know, 3 cars and 4 houses or whatever? But see, all of those are the foundations of the societal narrative that creates trauma at a broad level. Then, of course, there are individual, very deep traumas faced by different individuals of different categories of, if you're Black, if you're of a certain caste, if you're of a certain class, if you're, many layers of privileges, aggressions, microaggressions, traumas. But there is a foundational narrative here that's also very traumatizing. Does that make sense? I mean, I was just putting out my thoughts. They're not really well formed.
Absolutely. I don't know whether it was designed, but that's the way it has been conducted. It has become. It's like
it has become
the whole structure of everything itself. Governments. I mean, yesterday we heard how governments, were supposed to take care.
Exactly.
Even so, you look at every institution. Is based on some kind of fear. Even when this pandemic came about, can you imagine the amount of fear that was imposed? In fact, the fear would have killed more people than the virus itself,
Exactly. And
the media.
Right from kindergarten, children are driven either by coercion or fear or shaming or guilt. And all of these create trauma at different levels. So we have become this trauma producing machine. So thank you, Jasmeet, for bringing this up, because yes, how many leaders can say, oh, I'm in this position and I'm so joyful. I'm so glad. I'm glad. My heart fills with gratitude. Where is joy and love and gratitude and curiosity and courage and just the desire to play and explore? Where are all of those feelings in our spaces today?
Sahana, what would be your advice for a leader on the ground? You can choose the setting. It could be someone in a business organization, or it could be someone in government, or it could be someone who is independent, maybe a writer. What would be your what do you think? How do you think you would lead?
I don't know if I have any advice, Sanjeev. Actually, I don't have any advice, but I can only speak from my personal experience. It took me a while to realize that, I really had a lovely corporate career in the sense of, I did what I loved doing, teaching people, organizational learning, development, coaching. I did all of what I loved. I traveled the world. But ultimately, I think I came to a point where I realized I was leading two parallel lives, one for the organization as an individual, and one as me, as who I innately am. And who I innately am took me years to realize, okay? And I'm still realizing. It's like peeling an onion and it never ends. So I think, and I lived with that for a long, even with that split for a long time, till I reached a point where I could not. So I literally had a very heart-to-heart talk with my boss, who was very good. And I was in TCS, telling him that, I feel like I'm two-person, one inside and one outside. And this is not who I want to be. And I'm not giving my best. And I cannot be my best in the split kind of a consciousness mode. And that's when I left the corporate world to really understand this split within. And then that journey took me on a different path altogether, what's brought me here today. But I think one of the core is, and this is something I learned from a book by Parker Palmer called Let Your Life Speak, that one of the core of, I would say, being a leader today is to first and foremost be who you are. Not lead from external pressure, not lead because the paradigm, the construct is that you must be XYZ, you must be competitive, hyper competitive, aggressive, acquire this, M&As, the acquisitions. But just be first who I am and lead from that absolute place of authenticity, which, like Jasmeet said, requires first confronting your own fears. What will happen if this designation is taken? Who am I if I'm not the CEO of XYZ company? Take away the CEO bit and the company bit. Who am I? Can I live with that just meanness? And yeah, I would say start from there. Literally start from, it's tough because we are so addicted to our designations, not only to the salary part, but the designation and the paradigms of success that this particular cultural narrative imposes on us. But are those paradigms? Though they are human created paradigms, so they can be created again. Yeah, so maybe we need to look at different, completely new paradigms of quote unquote success.
What is the name of the book you mentioned?
Let Your Life Speak. I'll type it here.
Let Your Life Speak.
Let Your Life Speak. That's Parker Palmer. I think he was one of my, obviously it's a book that I've read and reread, but one of my driving inspirations.
Okay.
Okay, it's 4:30. On that note, we will bring it to a close. Thank you so much, Sahana.
Thank you all. Thank you for
Let Your Life Speak. I think that sort of summarizes
Lovely.
message in the age of uncertainty. And
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks all of you for participating. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
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 Hi everyone. Thank you so much for listening. So the next session, Idea Splash, is happening in Room Sangam. The link has been shared in chat box. Kindly look it and join it. Thank you. Mr. Radha Krishna. Ullah sir.